The Panthers get some goalie insurance. And is Mikko Rantanen actually in play for the Panthers?
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, March 6th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers, and on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. You can follow the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe. And if you're on the YouTube channel, make sure to press that like button down below. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. And you could do that all on FanDuel. So, Panther fans, we have a jam-packed show today, which we are less than 48 hours, just over 24 away from the trade deadline on Friday, which we could expect maybe another move for the Panthers with everything, with all the cap space cleared up. But with the cap space that they did clear up, they did make a trade for a goaltender. We are going to discuss that on today's show. We are going to discuss another signing for the Panthers. We are going to discuss more of the options. Is Mikko Rantanen in play for the Panthers with the deadline coming up tomorrow, and also preview tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Columbus Blue Jackets from Amerant Bank Arena. So around noon-ish on Wednesday, the Panthers were in on discussions for Vitek Vanecek of the San Jose Sharks, and this was something that we discussed with Jacob on yesterday's show, just what David Pragnota of the fourth period spoke about. And he's one of the most plugged in guys when it comes to the national writers for him, and thinking, okay, what's it going to be worth for a guy who's on an expiring deal, $3.4 million for him and the Panthers, and for him, second round draft pick out of the 2014 draft by the Washington Capitals, didn't make his debut until 2021. 6'2", 183-pound goaltender. The Panthers chased him after game 2 of the first round back in 2022, after he won game 1 in the Panthers President's Trophy season. 10 games of postseason experience with Washington and New Jersey. Wasn't the main starter in the run that the Devils made right before getting eliminated by the Carolina Hurricanes in 2022. And this is a trade for the Panthers that I like. It's insurance. It's with 5 sets of back-to-backs for the Panthers coming up, and really for them, you were not going to play Sergei Bobrovsky every single game from here on out for them. And also with the injury history from when Chris Driedger left the Panthers, in between to him coming back, and also his AHL numbers from what we saw, they had to get another guy in between the pipes, and he's an expiring deal for the Panthers. So it was only worth $3.4 million on their salary cap, and what they gave up for it was forward Patrick Giles. So really saw Patrick Giles really for the first time when he was with the Charlotte Checkers. He wasn't even on an NHL deal, on an entry-level deal. He played and this was someone that TJ Shalott, the play-by-play voice of the Charlotte Checkers, he saw this coming a mile away of him getting an NHL deal when he had his great season in 2022 for Charlotte, and then came into development camp, rookie showcase, and showed out and earned himself a deal. And even this year for Giles, he was battling for a spot on the fourth line when Tomas Nosek got injured in the first game of the preseason against the Nashville Predators, and then was really showing out and gave himself an opportunity. And also with him being waivers exempt, as far as paper transactions for the opening night roster, they had to send him and Spencer Knight down and eventually call them back up. And with when Alexander Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk were banged up at the start of the season, he was one of those guys who was able to plug and play and really was impactful, really, in Mackie Samoskiewicz's first goal. It was him along on that line, along with Uvis Balinskis. Let's not forget that Uvis Balinskis played a little bit of forward for the Panthers in a big stretch of the season for him. But the ceiling for Patrick Giles is a fourth liner for him. And listen, for him to get an opportunity possibly with the San Jose Sharks on a team that's still in a rebuild. They are still trying to find some identity pieces to put around Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith, and eventually their goaltender of the future in Yaroslav Askarov. That's a piece that could be a good short-term building block for them to be on the fourth line. Yeah, there was no points in the 9 games for Patrick Giles, and a lot of people were giving George Richards of Florida Hockey Now a lot of crap when he put in the caption promising player. I mean, they don't mean and people misinterpreted that. People thought promising as in a guy who was going to be a 20 goal scorer, a 40 point getter, but promising as far as a guy who's going to be could be a piece that you could plug and play and actually have some sustainability in being in an NHL lineup. And people, I believe a lot of people took that the wrong way. And I feel that a lot of people just didn't understand. And instead of just crapping on the guy, just wish him well and hope that he gets to succeed and that a fast track to the NHL. We spoke about Spencer Knight's fast track to getting starts with Chicago. It's going to happen for him. This is also the same thing for Patrick Giles for him. So wish him the best of luck. And for Vitek Vanecek, 10 games of playoff experience for him. Like we mentioned, the numbers aren't necessarily great for him, but the fact that he's been in those situations before, if Sergei Bobrovsky gets chased and you need him in between the pipes to allow Bob to be mentally ready for the next one, or even in the case of an injury, you have a guy who's been there before in Vanecek, and that's why you make a trade like this, and it costs the Panthers nothing. Patrick Giles was unfortunately not going to be a big part of the future for the Panthers, so it wasn't a premium asset that the Panthers gave up for him. So can't wait to see Vitek Vanecek make a few starts here when the regular season does wind down for them. Another signing that the Panthers made was Jesse Puljujarvi. Jesse Puljujarvi, we spoke about this on the show a few weeks ago, how he was on an AHL PCO with the Charlotte Checkers. But there are rules when it comes to eligibility for playoffs in the NHL and the AHL, which if someone wasn't on an AHL on a contract by the time the Friday's trade deadline was hit, they would have been ineligible for the Calder Cup playoffs. So in order for that to happen, they had to sign him to a deal and they had to put him on waivers. So we'll know by 2:00 if there is a team that is going to claim Jesse Puljujarvi. Maybe there's an opportunity for him to be called up and to play a few games for the Panthers in the case that they clinch either the division early or that they clinch a spot or they lock in their spot at number 2 in the Atlantic Division and get home ice there. So it's a 1-year, 2-way deal for Jesse Puljujarvi. He was a promising forward at the time, but again, this is his 4th team. How many times is when it comes to a player that you see the Panthers sweater on him if he were to be called up, but usually for the Panthers in their program, usually when it's guys who elevate their game, usually it's in their second stop. Excuse me. The only really exception for the Panthers has been Brandon Montour as far as the guy elevating their game to the next level on more than just one. So my expectations are once again very low for Jesse Puljujarvi, and my expectation is that he will be a part of the Charlotte Checkers playoff run, which they're still in contention to finish number 2 in the Atlantic Division there for them. Once again, we mentioned a 2-way deal for his contract, 1 year, $775K. His NHL salary will be $775K, while if he were in the minors, he'd be at $350K. That's according to Puckpedia for him. So we'll see what the Finnish forward can bring. Fourth stop didn't really elevate his game with the likes of Connor McDavid. Eventually traded to Carolina for very little for them. Had a little bit of a stint in Pittsburgh, and then unfortunately his contract was terminated for him. So we'll see what the Panthers can get out of him, and hopefully Jordy Kinnear can help him get get his game back and also the love of the game. But as far as like a 30 goal scorer or a 20 goal scorer that he was projected to be when he first came out of Finland, that expectation is not there for me. But the Panthers are wheeling and dealing when it comes to the trade deadline coming up, and they're trying to at least have more darts at their disposal for them. And with once again the Stanley Cup playoffs being just the grind that it is for nearly 2 months, you have another piece that the Panthers could use, and he could be a black ace if the case that the Charlotte Checkers season does come to an end early for them. But in segment number 2, we are going to discuss more of the options for the Panthers coming up for the trade deadline. Who are pieces that we discussed that have already been traded, and are the Panthers actually in on Mikko Rantanen? We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off and want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using the live betting features because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking up a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Segment number 2 here on this Thursday, March 6th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. So some of the players that we have been targeting as far as what we would like the Panthers to trade for. One of them is already off the list for the Panthers, as Yanni Gourde, who won the Stanley Cup with the Tampa Bay Lightning and went to a Stanley Cup final in 2022 when they lost. He is making his return to the Tampa Bay Lightning. We spoke about his 23-team no trade list that he had, and him along with Oliver Bjorkstrand were traded to Tampa Bay for 2 first-round picks, and the Detroit Red Wings retaining some of that salary as part of the trade for him. And man, whoo-wee, when it comes to that trade and Gourde being an expiring deal, and I believe Bjorkstrand does have a little bit of term. Going to check Puckpedia as we speak, but a lot of people thought that it might have been an overpayment for the Panthers in getting Seth Jones, but I'm going to argue that with Seth Jones having a whole bunch of term, and also with his play, you can't really necessarily judge his play with the Chicago Blackhawks. And I didn't even mention this in segment number 1. You can't really judge Vitek Vanecek's play behind a team in San Jose that was gutted right before their rebuild. And yeah, Oliver Bjorkstrand is on the books for another year at $5.4 million for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and these are debt pieces for Tampa Bay. So that's another one of those trades for Julien Brisebois that you are scratching your head a little bit, but at the same time, they have their top end talent in Kucherov, Point, Gensel, for them, Victor Hedman. So again, you are paying for depth for them. And really, if the Panthers and the Lightning both meet again in the first round, man, is one team going to hurt if they end up on the losing end of the first round for them. And this is what the NHL wants. This, a lot of fans want this, another battle of Florida, in order to once again build the rivalry. And it's officially a rivalry now that both teams have at least won one playoff series against one another. I know Tampa Bay does have the edge 2-1 for them, but now it's actually a real rivalry because both of these teams are good at the same time for them. But for the Panthers, it's once again with getting Vitek Vanecek into the mix, 5.31 left on their books to play with. It's use it or lose it for the Panthers here. So we mentioned Brandon Tanev, and just looking at his stats alone, it screams Panther with the amount of shot blocking and the hits that he delivers, and the Panthers having that physical edge to them. That just screams Florida Panther. I mean, yeah, the preference for me is a center over a winger for the Panthers to be part of the mix. And this, I believe it was the guys over at Panther Puri who posed this question on X. But what are the chances that Eetu Luostarinen comes off of Anton Lundell's wing and is actually inserted at fourth line center? That's something to wonder. But at the same time, is it too much of a good thing to split them up for them? I'm posing that question incorrectly, but is it worth it to split those guys up? Two guys who work well together. It was on full display even in the Four Nations face off for these two. That is it worth splitting those guys up in order to fill the center need? Because once again, Nosek, with him being undersized, loses a lot of his board battles for him. He's great in the dot, but still, I've noticed a lot of the size disadvantage that Thomas Nosek does have, and that could hurt the Panthers in the case that if they are on the road and they don't get that last change for them, that it could result in the top line winning some of those battles and against the Panthers fourth line, and then resulting in the back of their net for them. Frank Saravelli brought up if the right fit for the Florida Panthers is Kyle Palmieri, who's an expiring deal. He's a winger for the New York Islanders at the moment, and again, with the New York Islanders, you never know what they're going to do. You never know what Lou Lamoriello is thinking, because he sometimes likes to convince himself that his team is just a few steps away from becoming a contender, which they are 4 points out, which is still within striking distance if they were to just win a few games for them. But they're 4-6-0 in their last 10. They should trade Brock Nelson, and again, if you're Lou, you want to sell Brock Nelson high for him. The only way the Panthers could fit Brock Nelson is if the Islanders retain salary. But Kyle Palmieri, he makes $5 million. That fits perfectly with the Florida Panthers as one forward piece left, salary cap wise. And with Palmieri, 68 playoff games, 32 points, 18 of those being goals for him, a +11 and a right-handed shot forward, and a 13.1% shooting percentage in the postseason. This year, his regular season numbers is 16.9. But here's the thing. The New York Islanders also sacrifice a lot of defense for offense. They are a shell of themselves, of what they were when they made the 2 straight Eastern Conference final appearances back in 2020 and 2021. And they are relying heavily on Ilya Sorokin to bail them out. So, but it does provide the bottom 6 in more scoring, which that has been a big struggle for them this season. So maybe Kyle Palmieri could be that fit for the middle 6 for the Panthers on that third line, if you want to shift Jesper Boquist to Jonah Gadjevic's spot and have that complementary piece to Anton Lundell and Eetu Luostarinen. But if they do go the center route, I would also like to see Ryan Donato, who I got to watch Blackhawks Senators last night with Jack Bushman of Locked On Blackhawks in person. He's actually in Florida this weekend to cover some golf for the Arnold Palmer Invitational. And we got to watch the game together last night. And he scored again in the Blackhawks' 4-3 loss against the Ottawa Senators. And this is for Ryan Donato. This is a thing for him that it's not going to be something sustainable past this year. This is, in my opinion, just a little flash in the pan for him. So he's very cheap. He's an expiring deal for the Chicago Blackhawks. So, and it'll be a low cost trade, in my opinion, for the Panthers to acquire Donato and for him. And I've gotten a lot of people who have reached out to me asking about Vladimir Tarasenko. And yeah, we get attached to players who were a big part of an impactful part of the Florida Panthers Stanley Cup run. But the issue this year for Vladimir Tarasenko is just the term on his deal and how high of a cap hit it is compared to what the Panthers got for him last year and how they fit. And here's the thing, that's going to hurt the future for the Panthers, in which the chances already decreased when Seth Jones was acquired of keeping both Aaron Ekblad and Sam Bennett. You're going to have to keep one. And if you bring Tarasenko into the mix, an older guy who with term, you hurt your, and yeah, we had that conversation yesterday when it came to possibly trading for Scott Laughton for the Panthers. But that's Scott Laughton's a center. Vladimir Tarasenko's a winger. So that you don't want, if you're going to trade for a guy with term, you're going to do it for a center for the Panthers. At least in my opinion, I think that's what the Panthers should do if they do go that route. So I don't think Vladimir Tarasenko is in the books for the Panthers. And let's talk about Mikko Rantanen, which there have been reports, there's been conversation about where, because of the fact that Mikko Rantanen has not signed a deal with the Carolina Hurricanes right now. And listen, it could happen any minute. This podcast could drop and we could have news already about Mikko Rantanen, which I'm checking right now, and no, nothing new on the news front when it comes to Mikko Rantanen and his status with the Carolina Hurricanes. But if with Carolina, you're not going to get back what you traded for when you traded for Marty Necas for Mikko Rantanen. So, and there was a player survey, an agent survey, excuse me, on who are the hardest owners to work with and who are the cheapest owners to work with. And Tom Dundon, the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes, was a guy who was listed as one of the cheapest owners. We spoke about earlier a few weeks ago how Carolina is one of those, they improved their facilities and they're still ranked among last in the worst facilities for road opponents in their arena and around the area as well. But Tom Dundon has also gone to the point where he's gotten this reputation. He's backed it up with a few signings about the offer sheet with Sebastian Aho, trying to go after Jesperi Kotkaniemi as well. Is this going to be another one where he says, okay, I'll prove you wrong and I'll get Mikko Rantanen signed? And honestly, if he gets 13 for 8 years, well, that makes up for the 14 that he's looking for another team given the 7th year. And that makes up for the deal that he would have made elsewhere if he were to get 13. So and Carolina's in a situation where a lot of their expiring contracts are 30-year-olds. So they have the money to sign him. I think there's just a little bit of hardball, and that's what a negotiation is. And even if he walks, why would you give up a piece to a team that has been knocking on the door over and over again and hasn't broken through? That it's crunch time for them. It's crunch time for their core. And this is the score that they have been looking for. Yeah, it's been a struggle. Their power play has been down for them, but if you're the front office, if you're Eric Tulsky, you have to give this a chance. You have to go down swinging, just like the Panthers did with Seth Jones. So David Pagnotta said that the Panthers have expressed serious interest in Mikko Rantanen, but with already giving up so many first round picks with Spencer Knight as one and then a 2026 one, are the Panthers going to go balls to the walls again like they did in 2022? That's kind of what I'm afraid of. And maybe that's a little bit of PTSD from that trade deadline for them. Is it going to be another situation for them? But yeah, I would trust this style of play that the Panthers have now over what they had in 2022 when they traded for Giroux and Sherratt. Hindsight is 2020, but that was overkill. But then we could revisit some history and put it to now. Would this be overkill for the Panthers as well? And would this mess up things too much for them if they were to go after Mikko Rantanen and then let him walk? Because they're not going to pay $14 million or $13 million for him. But at the same time, it's if they were to trade for him and they win the cup and he walks, again, the trade is worth it. You just never know when it comes to that. Again, what that would hurt the Panthers' ability to make impactful trades even next trade deadline, which we saw in 2023 when they made 0. So what do you want? Do you want to be in that position if you were to go if you were to go into that direction of going after Mikko Rantanen? So that's something to consider for them. But if you're Carolina, I think he stays. I don't think there's a chance that he gets traded, but I could be wrong. The trade deadline is just over 24 hours away. But in segment number 3, we are going to preview tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Columbus Blue Jackets, as it will be their last game before the trade deadline. We're going to discuss that all next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment 3 here on this Thursday, March 6th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So the Panthers and the Blue Jackets meet tonight from Amerant Bank Arena. Vitek Vanecek skated on the ice for the Panthers for the first time as a member of the team. So great to see that he has already made it to South Florida to be the backup for Sergei Bobrovsky. At least that's where we're assuming. We don't have an official announcement as of right now of who's going to be the starter. But great to see that he is in the mix for the Panthers. So Panthers welcome the Blue Jackets, and once again, what a story for Columbus with everything that they've gone through with the death of Johnny Gaudreau. But the more and more I think about this, the more the Columbus Blue Jackets win, which their record right now is 30, 23, and 8 with 68 points. This does not seem like a fluke for Columbus. And even before Johnny Gaudreau unfortunately passed away, I was discussing the general manager opening for Columbus with Don Waddell eventually taking the position, going from Carolina to Columbus. It is one of the best situations that you want to go through. Young core, lots of cap space, a guy who wanted to be there in Sean Monahan, even though he hasn't played since early January. You still have a lot to work with there. And with the rising cap, hey, that they're going to give themselves an opportunity to go big game hunting this offseason for them. They have top defenseman in Zach Werenski, who's really on his way to winning the Norris Trophy. When Elvis Merzlikins is on, he's a top 15 goaltender. They just extended Matthew Olivier, who's one of the toughest players in the NHL, brings the sandpaper there. And also toughness is around, up and down the lineup for the Blue Jackets. James Van Riemsdyk in a game against Utah gets hit with a high stick, knocks 4 teeth out, had 30 stitches, came back into the game and assisted on a game-tying goal. And even after x-rays revealed that a piece of his tooth was stuck in the stitched up lip, so they had to take it out, remove it, and stitch the lip back up for him, and had to eat food through a straw along with playing with a shield. And more players are wanting to stay in Columbus, like and it was a reputation that we've been talking about even half a decade ago with Bobrovsky leaving, Seth Jones, Artemi Panarin. Now players want to stay. The culture has really truly shifted. They have literally a homegrown player in Sean Corrali, who is from the area. They had just had an outdoor game at the Horseshoe at Ohio State. We mentioned this earlier in the week, but the setup between that, they had also had a home and home against Detroit. They went to Detroit, won both of those games, and also the buzz there is real. The Ohio State filled. It was 85-15 what it looked like in the crowd, mostly Columbus fans as well. And it's a market that's growing with the sport. They haven't really had a long playoff run for them, but still they have shown that the getting behind the fan base has shown getting behind them with everything with Johnny Hockey, and also the winning and a young core. Kromarchenko, let's talk about him. This is only his third season in the NHL. Second round pick out of the 2018 entry draft, has a career high in goals with 20 less games played than his previous career high. So he's among the most improved players around the league. And to think that this guy broke his jaw. He was sitting on the bench, a puck comes to his face, breaks his jaw, and only misses 3 games. Yes, there was a 4 Nations break in between him breaking his jaw and the first game back. So he used that 4 Nations break to get better and was right back into the action after all that. So James Van Riemsdyk and Kirill Marchenko, hockey tough as it comes. And also the Columbus Blue Jackets, they're salivating right now. This game tonight for the Panthers and the Blue Jackets is a big swing game in the Eastern Conference playoff race. The Leafs lost last night in regulation to the Vegas Golden Knights, so that means the Panthers hold the tiebreaker for first in the Atlantic due to regulation wins. They have one more regulation win than the Toronto Maple Leafs, 32-31 for them, so the Panthers hold that. The Panthers do play 3 more times before they meet the Maple Leafs, and the Maple Leafs play 2 more times before they meet next Thursday in Toronto. But Columbus is salivating for an opportunity because they have an opportunity to get into the top 3 because the New Jersey Devils, they're in a downward trajectory. They've dealt with injuries throughout the last few years. It feels like they're some of the worst luck when it comes to injuries. I mean, Columbus is without Sean Monahan, as mentioned earlier. They're without Cole Sillinger for tonight's game. They're both on IR. But New Jersey, last year it was no Dougie Hamilton. At points this season, it was no Jacob Markstrom, who missed his 4 Nations. Now it's no Jack Hughes, not only for the regular season, but the playoffs. He's not going to be part of the playoffs if the New Jersey Devils do, in fact, make it there for them. Another shoulder surgery for Jack Hughes after taking a hit against the Vegas Golden Knights, and he's not going to be returning even in the postseason. So they've freed up some LTIR space for them. So this is a Columbus Blue Jackets team to take very seriously, and also for the Panthers. Thankfully, it's at home, which they've been playing a lot better there as of late after a not so great start at home. But still, they are facing up against a hungry bunch in Columbus, and for the Panthers being the Stanley Cup champions and the hunted as everyone gets up to play them, this could be a classic of a hockey game when it comes to just the race and just the approaching trade deadline, where both teams in Columbus and Florida are gonna once again get to work tomorrow. I don't think Columbus plays tomorrow, but still they are going to get to work when it comes to evaluating their situations, that both teams are going to be buyers. Columbus does not play tomorrow. They will be in Florida and then be at Madison Square Garden on Sunday against the Rangers. So they're going to get busy, and they're coming off a loss on Tuesday night against the Tampa Bay Lightning. They lost 6-2, which, hey, Tampa Bay won 9 of their last 10, and their one loss in that stretch came against the Florida Panthers, and the Panthers knew how important that game was at the time for at least creating some separation in the Atlantic and getting one step closer to home ice in round 1, which with still so much work left to do for them. But that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Make sure to come back for tomorrow's edition of the show, where we are going to break down tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Columbus Blue Jackets. So make sure to come back and listen then. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.